Saigon never really turns off. When people think about Saigon at night, they usually imagine bright lights, busy streets, and endless food. But there's another side to the city. Tonight, we're going to explore what really happens after the sun goes down. One thing that surprises many foreigners about Vietnam is that life doesn't slow down after sunset. It simply moves outdoors. By 7 in the evening, the parks are just beginning to fill up. Parents bring their children here after dinner. Some come to roller skate, others play badminton, some simply run around until they're too tired to keep going. Summer vacation has just begun, so many children can stay outside until late at night. While some people are starting their evening out, others are only just starting work. Adults have their own evening routine too. Walking, jogging, or exercising in the park is part of everyday life for many Vietnamese people. It's one of the reasons you'll rarely find these parks empty after dark. As the weather becomes cooler, the city almost feels like it has come back to life. One thing I love about Saigon is that every neighborhood has places like this. You don't have to go far to find something to eat or drink. Small sidewalk stalls quietly appear as the crowds arrive. Most people walk past them without giving them a second thought, but behind almost every cart is a story. This small drink stand is run by a couple in their 50s. To most people, it's just another street vendor, but for them, it's their livelihood. Perhaps even the story of a family built one drink at a time. As children fill one side of the park, another generation gathers on the other. Every evening, groups of middle-aged residents meet here to dance together. You don't need an invitation. If you know the steps, you're welcome to join. And if you don't, someone will probably teach you anyway. That's something I really like about parks in Vietnam. Football, badminton, and sepak takraw remain some of the country's most popular sports. Meanwhile, many older residents prefer something slower: yoga, meditation, or traditional exercises they've practiced for years. Everyone seems to have found their own little corner of the park. Different ages, different routines, but somehow sharing the same evening together. After about a 30-minute ride, the atmosphere changes completely. This is the COVID Park. It was built to honor the people who lost their lives during the pandemic, along with the doctors, nurses, volunteers, and countless ordinary people who helped the city through one of the hardest periods in its history. Across Vietnam, more than 20,000 people lost their lives during the pandemic. My grandmother was one of them. So this place feels a little different to me. Growing up in Vietnam, there's a saying almost everyone knows: when you drink water, remember its source. It's a simple reminder to never forget the people who came before us or those who helped us when we needed them most. That's exactly what this park represents. Around the park, you'll also find murals and displays remembering the pandemic. Images of free rice, ATMs, $0 supermarkets, and volunteers delivering food to families during lockdown. At its center stands a giant water drop. Inside it is a heart, symbolizing gratitude, compassion, and hope. Today, the park has become much more than a memorial. Children run through it, families gather here in the evenings, friends sit together and enjoy the cooler air. Life has returned. But not everyone experiences the city in the same way. Just a short walk from the park, I met an elderly woman living alongside several stray dogs. Life clearly hasn't been easy for her. Yet something quietly beautiful caught my attention. Every few minutes, someone would stop. Some offered food, others left a small amount of money. No one stayed very long. They simply helped and continued on with their evening. Next, let's head to one of the city's most iconic landmarks, Ben Thanh Market. As the temperature cools down, more and more people begin arriving. Some come to take photos, some simply sit and enjoy the evening breeze, and quite a few are busy creating content for social media. I even spotted people live streaming right here in front of the market. Honestly, that's not a bad office view. Just across the street is Metro Line 1, the first urban railway in Ho Chi Minh City. Tonight, I'm only stopping by the station. I'll save the full metro journey for another video. Walking around Ben Thanh at night, you'll still come across cyclo drivers waiting for passengers. For many visitors, it's a nostalgic way to experience the city. One funny thing I've noticed, sometimes foreign tourists end up giving the driver a ride instead. It always makes me smile. Even late into the evening, the streets around Ben Thanh are still full of energy. One thing you'll find almost everywhere in Vietnam is milk tea. Over the last few years, it's become one of the most popular drinks among young people. I drink it quite often myself, although having one this late at night probably isn't my smartest decision. There's another scene you'll quickly notice in Vietnam: tiny plastic stools. They're everywhere. People gather around them to drink coffee, eat together, chat with friends, or simply watch the city pass by. It's not a trend. It's not something designed for social media. It's simply part of everyday life, generation after generation. Even the gas stations stay brightly lit throughout the night. By around 10:30 p.m., most clothing stores have already closed. But food, that's a different story. In Vietnam, if you're hungry late at night, finding something to eat is usually the easy part. Interestingly, Starbucks is still considered a bit of a premium coffee experience for many people in Vietnam. For the price of one drink here, you could easily enjoy several cups of local Vietnamese coffee instead. You'll also notice electric bikes and scooters available for rent throughout the city. Just scan a QR code and you're ready to go. In recent years, electric vehicles have become much more common in Vietnam. You'll probably notice VinFast taxis almost everywhere you go. And while many people are ending their day, others are just getting started. For countless workers across the city, the night shift has only just begun. A few minutes later, I arrived at another place that's just as famous. Nguyen Hue Walking Street. People come here for a slow evening walk, to meet friends, or simply to enjoy the cooler air after a long day. If you listen carefully, you'll hear conversations in dozens of different languages. It's one of the places where locals and international visitors naturally come together. But just like everywhere else in Saigon, the people enjoying the evening are only part of the story. Around them, street vendors continue selling drinks, toys, and small souvenirs. While many people are taking a break, others are still working to support their families. It's a contrast you see almost everywhere in this city. One of the newer additions to Nguyen Hue is something called a digital citizen station. It's a small public kiosk where people can access government services online. And even check some basic health information free of charge. It's a small sign of how everyday life in Vietnam is becoming increasingly digital. Another thing that's become incredibly popular in recent years is these little photo booths. You'll often see young people lining up to take pictures together before heading home. It's a simple memory, but sometimes those become the best ones. Looking up, you'll probably notice one of the city's most recognizable buildings, the Cafe Apartment. Years ago, this was simply an old apartment building. Today, almost every apartment has been transformed into cafes, restaurants, boutique shops, and small bars. I think it's one of the best examples of how old buildings in Saigon continue to find a new purpose. Let's go upstairs and have a look. Even the hallways have become part of the experience. Many visitors stop here to take photos before even entering a cafe. Inside, every floor has its own atmosphere. Some cafes are quiet and cozy. Others are full of music and conversation. You'll find Vietnamese food, coffee, desserts, souvenirs, and plenty of places to sit down and watch the city from above. Places like this remind me that cities are always changing. A building that once held hundreds of ordinary lives now welcomes thousands of visitors every day. The walls are still the same, only the stories inside have changed. After all that walking, I think it's finally time to grab something to eat. Let's head to one of Saigon's night markets. On the way to the night market, you'll often see elderly people still working late into the evening. At an age when many people would rather be at home with their families, some are still out here trying to make a living. A few minutes later, I arrived at the night market. Families, students, couples, tourists, everyone seems to be looking for something good to eat. You'll also notice that crowded places like this often attract people with disabilities asking for help. It's just another side of city life. All right, let's see what we can find. This is one of my favorite desserts in Vietnam. It's made with nipa palm fruit, chia seeds, grass jelly, and a few other ingredients. If you've never tried nipa palm before, it's definitely worth a try.
Làm hơi Bình Dương đi.
It's soft, slightly chewy, and really refreshing. Mixed with coconut water, it's the perfect drink on a hot night like this. Not too sweet, which is exactly how I like it. One thing I really like about Vietnamese night markets is that you never run out of choices. Every few steps, there's something different. Grilled squid, fresh fruit juice, spiral potatoes, desserts. Even food from neighboring countries. This is Cambodian-style grilled beef. It's slightly sweet, served with pickled vegetables and a little chili sauce. Simple, but really good. I came here thinking I'd just grab a quick snack. That plan lasted about 5 minutes. Every time I walked past another stall, I'd see something else I wanted to try. That's probably the biggest problem with Vietnamese night markets. You always end up eating more than you planned. Seafood is everywhere too. Some of it probably looks familiar, while others might be something you've never seen before. Sea urchins, giant conch, and even horseshoe crabs. That's one of the things I enjoy about Vietnamese night markets. You never really know what you'll discover next. By now, it's almost 11 p.m. The crowds have started to thin out a little. But the city is still wide awake. So, let's head to one of the most famous nightlife streets in Ho Chi Minh City. Before we get there, there's a small alley filled with cozy restaurants and cafes. It's much quieter than the places we're about to visit. Some people come here for dinner. Others just want somewhere to sit, relax, and escape the noise for a while. Just a short walk away, everything changes. This is Bui Vien Walking Street. Tonight isn't even the weekend, and it's still packed with people. Music pours out from almost every bar. Street performers gather small crowds. Tourists and locals walk shoulder to shoulder. Whether you love it or hate it, it's definitely one of the liveliest places in the city after dark.
And stand by for your other requests in here. So some of your songs,
welcome our friends here from Russian friends here. Timor! Yeah!
After spending a while in Bui Vien, I think my ears needed a little break. Just outside the busy streets, people are already waiting for their next ride home. Long-distance buses run throughout the night in Vietnam, so even close to midnight, people are still arriving, leaving, and continuing their journeys. I always find that interesting. While one part of the city is winding down, another part is only just getting started. So let's leave the music behind and head somewhere a little quieter. Across the Saigon River, there's a completely different side of the city waiting for us. Well, it's getting close to midnight now, but there are still plenty of people around. The souvenir stalls are still open. One thing that caught my attention was this little handmade toy. It's made from nipa palm leaves, the same plant that gave us the nipa palm fruit we tried earlier tonight. Years ago, these leaves were even used to build houses in parts of southern Vietnam. The cafes are still full of young people chatting with friends. Even the barbershop is still open. Honestly, I don't think I've ever wanted a haircut at midnight. Families are still bringing their children out to play. Some are at the playground, others are trying the small rides nearby. Summer vacation has just started, so it's easy to see why this place is still so lively. I like walking around places like this. You don't really need to do anything. Just watching people enjoy their evening is already interesting enough. I've noticed that a lot of young Western travelers who come to Vietnam love trying adventurous or adrenaline-filled activities. Adults won't get bored either. There are plenty of rides for them too. This is what cafes in Vietnam often look like during major football tournaments like the World Cup. Even if the match kicks off after midnight, you'll still find them packed with fans. Vietnamese people really love football. Looking back on tonight, I feel like I've seen many different sides of Saigon. Families spending time together in the parks, a brand new metro line running through the city, street performers entertaining crowds in Bui Vien, night markets full of food, quiet cafes hidden inside old apartment buildings, and a peaceful riverside park looking back at the skyline. But there's one part of the city we've been seeing all night without really noticing it. The people who keep everything running. Construction workers building tomorrow's Saigon. Street cleaners working long after everyone else has gone home. Street vendors waiting for one last customer before calling it a night. Recycling collectors searching through bins outside bars and cafes. Most of them never become the focus of a travel video. They're simply there, somewhere in the background, easy to miss. I don't mention this to make anyone feel sad. I just think it's worth remembering. Every city has people like this. And tonight, they were just as much a part of Saigon as the lights, the cafes, and the crowds. That's what I love about this city. No matter what time it is, someone is always beginning their day while someone else is ending theirs. Saigon never really feels empty, it just changes. Anyway, that's one night in Saigon, a city that never really feels the same from one neighborhood to the next. Thanks for exploring it with me. If you'd like to keep exploring Vietnam and Southeast Asia with me, I'd love to have you along. See you in the next video.